The forbidden hunt begins. The planet Xar'Thul was a place of fear and nightmares. No sane being dared to step on its soil, and for good reason. It was home to the Vorgrath, the deadliest creature in the known galaxy. The few who had seen it and lived to tell the tale described it as a mountain of claws, teeth, and rage. Entire planets had been evacuated just to avoid a single Vorgrath escaping. Yet today, there was movement in the death zone, the deepest part of the planet where nothing survived. From the safety of his observation ship, a Xar'Thul researcher named Xar'Thul watched his scanners with growing horror. The screen showed a single life form walking through the black sands of Xar'Thul. A human. Xar'Thul's three-fingered hands trembled as he zoomed in. The human was alone, carrying only a long knife and a small bag slung over his shoulder. No armor, no advanced weapons, no backup. It was madness. Xar'Thul opened his communicator, desperately trying to send a warning. "Human, get out of there. You have no idea what you're doing." The human didn't respond. He just kept walking. Xar'Thul's panic grew. The Vorgrath could smell prey from kilometers away. The moment this fool stepped into its hunting ground, he was dead. A low, thunderous growl echoed across the landscape. The human stopped. Slowly, he turned his head. Xar'Thul's scanners went wild. The Vorgrath had awakened. Then, from the shadows of the jagged rock formations, it emerged. It was massive. Its thick, armored hide was darker than the night sky, blending into the landscape. Its eyes glowed like molten fire, and its jaws, large enough to crush a tank, dripped with a black, steaming liquid. Its claws, each the size of a grown man, tore through the sand as it stepped forward. Xar'Thul's breath caught in his throat. The Vorgrath had locked onto its prey. The human should have run. He should have screamed for help. He should have begged for mercy. Instead, the human smiled. Xar'Thul's eyes widened. Was he insane? Then, in one smooth motion, the human drew his knife. Xar'Thul's heart pounded. No, it was impossible. He had seen footage of entire military squadrons falling to a single Vorgrath. A lone human with a knife. It wasn't a fight. It was suicide. The Vorgrath roared. The force of the sound shook the ground. The beast lunged forward, claws flashing, jaws snapping. The human moved. Xar'Thul's breath caught. He dodged. Not by accident, not by luck, but with precision. The human bent, rolled, and slipped under the Vorgrath's first strike, like he had done it 1,000 times before. The beast swung again, its claws carving deep trenches into the black sand. But the human was already gone. Xar'Thul's mind raced. How was he this fast? Then the human attacked. With inhuman agility, he leaped onto the Vorgrath's back, grabbing hold of the bony ridges along its spine. The beast thrashed, trying to shake him off. Xar'Thul clenched his fists. It was over. The Vorgrath would roll, crush him under its weight, rip him apart. But then, the human plunged his knife deep into the beast's neck. The Vorgrath howled in rage and pain. It reared up, shaking violently. Xar'Thul's scanners beeped. Its vitals were dropping. No way. The Vorgrath bucked, spun, and slammed itself into the rocks, trying to dislodge the human. But the human held on, his grip like iron. And then, with a sudden movement, he twisted the blade. A final, guttural roar echoed across the landscape. The Vorgrath collapsed. Silence. For a long moment, Xar'Thul couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. The Vorgrath, the unstoppable nightmare of the galaxy, was dead. And the human. He stood up, brushed the dust off his shoulders, and grinned. Xar'Thul's breath came in ragged gasps. What was he? The human pulled out his knife, wiped it clean on his sleeve, and then he pulled out a small fire starter. Xar'Thul blinked. What? The human gathered some dry branches, stacking them into a small pile. Then, casually, he sliced off a chunk of the Vorgrath's flesh and skewered it on his knife. Xar'Thul's brain shut down. No, No, the Vorgrath's flesh was toxic. Even the smallest amount could kill a being instantly. Every species in the galaxy knew that. It was common knowledge. And yet, the human roasted the meat over the fire, turning it slowly, letting the fat sizzle. The rich, smoky scent filled the air. Then, he took a bite. Xar'Thul screamed through the communicator. "No, stop. You will die." The human chewed, thought for a moment. Then, he grinned. "Tastes like chicken." Xar'Thul nearly fainted. And that was when he realized. The galaxy was not ready for humans. The unthinkable battle. Xar'Thul's mind struggled to process what he had just witnessed. He had seen many horrors in his time as a researcher: wars, planetary disasters, even the slaughter of entire species. But nothing had ever prepared him for this. A human had just killed a Vorgrath, alone. And now, he was eating it. The very thought made Xar'Thul's 3 hearts pound wildly. This was impossible. The Vorgrath's flesh wasn't just toxic, it was a biological weapon in itself. It contained enzymes so lethal that even a single molecule could cause organ failure in seconds. The deadliest predators in the galaxy wouldn't even scavenge its corpse. Yet the human sat by his small fire, casually chewing his meal, as if he were enjoying the simple home-cooked dinner. The flames flickered against his rugged face, his expression calm, satisfied, completely unaffected. Xar'Thul gulped. He had only one explanation for what he was seeing. This creature isn't human. It's a monster. Then, the ground trembled. A deep guttural growl rumbled across the black sands. The flames from the fire wavered. The air became thick with an unnatural stillness. Xar'Thul's scanners went berserk. More Vorgrath. 3 of them. They had arrived. The ambush of beasts. The hulking shadows moved swiftly, surrounding the human in a deadly semicircle. Their enormous forms loomed in the firelight, their claws carving trenches in the sand. Xar'Thul's breath caught in his throat. There was no way out. The Vorgrath never allowed an enemy to kill one of their own without retribution. Their intelligence was low, but their hive instincts were sharp. They didn't just seek revenge. They made examples out of those who dared challenge them. And yet, the human didn't look afraid. He didn't run. He didn't even reach for his knife. Instead, he took another bite of his roasted meat and chewed. Slowly, casually. One of the Vorgrath, the largest among them, let out a deafening shriek, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow a fighter-class hovercraft. Still, the human didn't move. Xar'Thul watched in paralyzed horror. Then, the human finally reacted. He sighed, put down his food, and grinned. Good, I was getting hungry. Before Xar'Thul could even process what was happening, the human moved. Fast. Too fast. One moment, he was sitting. The next, he was on his feet, sprinting toward the largest Vorgrath with reckless speed. The Vorgrath swiped with its massive claws, enough to slice a battle cruiser in half. The human dodged. He didn't stumble. He didn't even break his momentum. He simply ducked, rolled, and reappeared behind the beast in an instant. Xar'Thul had seen high-speed combat before. He had watched elite soldiers using energy-based enhancements to increase reaction times. But this was raw, natural, primal. The Vorgrath turned with unnatural speed for a creature its size, roaring in frustration. But the human was already gone. He had leaped onto the beast's back like a predator mounting its prey. His knife flashed in the firelight, and then it plunged deep into the Vorgrath's thick, armored hide. The beast shrieked in agony as blood as black as the void sprayed from the wound. The other 2 Vorgrath lunged at the human simultaneously, their massive bodies crushing rock beneath them. Xar'Thul clenched his fists. It was over. Then, the human jumped. At the last possible second, he used his knife as a pivot, still embedded in the first Vorgrath, and vaulted into the air. The 2 attacking beasts slammed into each other, their enormous bodies colliding with a sickening crunch. And the human. He landed effortlessly on his feet. Knife in one hand, a fresh Vorgrath tooth in the other. Xar'Thul stared, his mind barely functioning. He had ripped the tooth straight from the monster's mouth in midair. The Vorgrath, now furious, charged together. The human laughed. The fight of a predator. What followed was not a battle. It was a hunt. And the human, he was the hunter. He weaved through the beasts like a shadow, dodging strikes that should have been impossible to avoid. Every movement was deliberate. Every dodge, every step, every counterattack was measured, precise, ruthless. The first beast fell within minutes, its throat slashed wide open. The second tried to retreat. The human didn't let it. With a running start, he launched himself onto the Vorgrath's back, and with one final brutal strike, plunged his knife directly into its skull. The beast shuddered, and then it collapsed. Silence fell. 3 Vorgrath lay dead. The human, still standing. The aftermath. Xar'Thul's body refused to move. His eyes remained locked on the figure standing in the firelight. Marcus Kane, a mere human, had just wiped out 4 of the deadliest creatures in the known galaxy. Alone. With a knife. And what did he do next? The human sighed, stretched his arms, and began skinning the beasts for more meat. Xar'Thul nearly fainted. This wasn't just impossible. It was terrifying. Because if a single human could do this, what could an army of them accomplish? And that thought sent a cold wave of fear through every fiber of Xar'Thul's being. For the first time in his life, he feared humanity. The feast that shouldn't exist. The black sands of Selvaris were soaked in blood. The corpses of 4 Vorgrath, the most feared creatures in the galaxy, lay lifeless around a small campfire. And in the center of it all, a single human. Marcus Kane sat cross-legged by the fire, casually slicing meat from the fallen Vorgrath, his expression one of calm satisfaction. The flames crackled, casting flickering shadows against the grotesque scene of slaughter. Above him, in the safety of his research vessel, Xar'Thul sat frozen, staring at the display screen in sheer, mind-numbing horror. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. A human had not only killed a Vorgrath, he had hunted and butchered 4 of them, as if it were a casual sport. And now, he was eating them. Toxic beyond imagination. Xar'Thul's eyes darted to his biological analysis scanner, desperately looking for something, anything, that could explain what he was seeing. The Vorgrath's flesh was death itself. It contained a unique blend of paralytic enzymes, neurotoxic acids, and cellular decay compounds so powerful that even a molecule of raw meat in the bloodstream could liquefy organs within minutes. Entire species had gone extinct just from accidental exposure. There was a reason no scavenger, no apex predator, nothing in the known universe dared touch a Vorgrath's corpse. Yet Marcus Kane, he had cooked it over an open fire. And now, he was taking another bite. A scientist's horror. Xar'Thul slammed his fist against the console, opening his communicator. Human. Stop. Spit it out now. You are going to die. The response. Marcus took his time chewing. Then, without any concern, he grinned and said, "Tastes like chicken." Xar'Thul's brain nearly shut down. This was impossible. This was against every law of biology. Xar'Thul's hands flew over his controls, scanning Marcus's vitals, expecting to see catastrophic organ failure, toxic shock, nervous system collapse. But his readings? Marcus Kane was perfectly fine. Not just fine, better than fine. Heart rate, steady. Blood oxygen, optimal. Metabolism, processing the toxic meat as if it were a normal meal. What was he? A terrifying discovery. Xar'Thul's mind raced. There had to be an explanation. Some unknown human resistance, some natural enzyme that neutralized the toxins, something. He ran an in-depth scan of the Vorgrath meat over the fire, analyzing its molecular structure. Then, his screen flashed red. Warning. Unknown biochemical reaction detected. Corvell's breath hitched. He zoomed in, heart pounding. The heat from the fire. It was breaking down the lethal toxins, rendering the flesh edible. No. This was not just a human eating something deadly. This was a discovery that changed everything. Because if humans had figured out a way to cook Vorgrath meat safely, then the deadliest predator in the galaxy was actually a food source. The galaxy shudders. Corvell's body trembled. He needed to report this. That Xar'Thul Council, the Galactic Union, the scientific community, everyone needed to know what he had just discovered. But as his hand hovered over the transmission button, a chilling thought entered his mind. If humans could eat Vorgrath, what else could they eat? Could they consume other creatures once thought to be unkillable? Could they digest species that ruled the food chains of entire planets? If humans were truly capable of turning death itself into sustenance, then humanity wasn't just another species in the galactic order. They were apex predators in a way the galaxy had never seen before. A second warning. Corvell swallowed hard and hit the communicator again. Marcus Kane. The human looked up, raising an eyebrow. Corvell forced himself to stay calm. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Marcus exhaled, setting his knife down. Yeah. He tossed a perfectly cooked piece of Vorgrath meat into the fire and watched it sizzle. I just found dinner. Corvell's skin prickled with fear. Marcus stretched, cracking his shoulders. Then he leaned back, looking up at the sky as if he wasn't sitting in the middle of a massacre. You know, this is actually kind of good, Marcus mused, taking another bite. I bet if I add some spices, it'll taste even better. Spices? Spices? Corvell clutched his head. This wasn't just a human eating the deadliest creature in existence. He was planning recipes. The shadows stir. But before Corvell could spiral into further panic, a new signal flashed on his scanners. Something was approaching. Something big. Corvell's breath caught. Was it more Vorgrath? Impossible. They should have learned their lesson. Then the communicator crackled with a new voice. Attention, unknown human. By order of the Xar'Thul Council, you are to be detained immediately. Corvell's blood ran cold. A bounty force. They had already put out a hunt for Marcus Kane. And as Xar'Thul stared at the incoming fleet on his monitor, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy wasn't ready for humans. But the humans, they were just getting started. The impossible truth. The night sky above Xar'Thul was no longer empty. Corvell's scanners screamed with warning signals as dozens of ships entered the planet's orbit. Their sleek designs, glowing blue insignias, and the cold precision of their formation told him everything he needed to know. The Xar'Thul Council had sent an elite capture unit. Corvell's fingers trembled as he pulled up the data feed. 42 military-grade ships, 4 Juggernaut-class interceptors, 2 dreadnoughts armed with plasma cannons powerful enough to turn small moons into dust, all for one human. And below them, on the cursed black sands of Xar'Thul, Marcus Kane tore another bite of roasted Vorgrath meat and leaned back against one of the corpses he had slain, completely unbothered. Corvell's mouth was dry. Did this human even understand what was about to happen? The communicator crackled again. Attention, human. This is Commander Xar'Thul of the Xar'Thul Council's Special Detainment Unit. You are in violation of Galactic Code 742B. Cease all activity and prepare for immediate surrender. Marcus glanced up at the sky and exhaled through his nose. Then he popped another piece of Vorgrath into his mouth, chewing slowly. Corvell felt his lungs tighten. Does this fool not understand that an entire fleet is about to wipe him off the map? Corvell slammed his communicator. Human, do you hear them? This isn't some low-level security force. This is the Council's best. You have to get out of there. Now, Marcus finally looked at the sky with mild amusement. He swallowed his food, cracked his knuckles, and smirked. And here I was hoping for dessert. The galactic panic begins. The Xar'Thul ships hovered just above the battlefield, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. A deep, vibrating hum filled the air as their plasma weapons charged up, ready to reduce Marcus and everything around him into molecular dust. Commander Xar'Thul's voice came again, sharper, colder. You have 10 seconds to comply. Xar'Thul could barely breathe. 10 seconds. That wasn't a warning. That was a death sentence. His hands flew over the console, desperately trying to find a way to override the Council's orders. Maybe he could interfere with the targeting systems, jam their signals, give Marcus a chance to escape. Then his ship's sensors caught something strange. Xar'Thul frowned. Was there a malfunction? The atmosphere above Marcus was warping. A heat distortion. No, something else. Something worse. Xar'Thul zoomed in, trying to get a better reading. Then his entire ship shook violently as an explosion erupted in the distance. One of the Xar'Thul warships had just exploded. Xar'Thul's breath caught in his throat. The other Xar'Thul ships scattered in chaos, trying to reposition. Then another ship went up in flames. And another. And another. The arrival of a nightmare. Xar'Thul's vision blurred as he processed what was happening. Something else was here. Something that wasn't on the Council's radar. And then his scanners finally got a lock. His blood turned to ice. A human warship. No, not just any human warship. This was an Earth-born Predator-class destroyer, and it had just decloaked. Xar'Thul's heart slammed against his ribs. Where had it even come from? How had the Xar'Thul not seen it? Then, through the smoke, the comms crackled with a new voice. Deep, rough, amused. You know, we don't usually interfere with planetary hunts, but when we heard one of our boys was having a barbecue, we figured we'd stop by. Xar'Thul's blood ran cold. That was a Terran military captain. And if the Predator-class destroyer was here, that meant the Terran fleet knew about Marcus. And they weren't letting him go. The humans' real power. Marcus stretched his arms, cracking his neck. He glanced at the burning wreckage of the warships, then turned his eyes to the remaining fleet above him. Then he grinned. Well, boys, looks like dinner's over. He grabbed his knife, slamming it into his belt, then picked up his bag. And then he took his first step toward the ships. Xar'Thul's stomach churned. No, 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 this isn't happening. Was he really about to charge an entire fleet with nothing but a knife? Marcus rolled his shoulders. And then he sprinted. Xar'Thul's heart nearly stopped. Marcus moved too fast, too smooth. In mere seconds, he leaped onto the wreckage of a fallen Xar'Thul ship, used it as a springboard, and launched himself into the air, straight toward the next closest warship. The Xar'Thul inside panicked, opening fire. Plasma rounds cut through the air, but Marcus was already dodging mid-flight, twisting through the shots like he had done this 1,000 times before. Then, he landed on the hull of the warship, and with one effortless movement, he ripped open the armored hatch with his bare hands. Xar'Thul's mind shattered. This human, this wasn't a soldier. This wasn't just an experienced fighter. This was a weapon in human form. And now, he had just declared war. A terrifying realization. Xar'Thul clutched the sides of his seat, staring at the impossible battle unfolding before him. The Xar'Thul Council had always believed humans were weak, primitive, barbaric. But today, Xar'Thul saw the truth. Humans weren't weak. They had simply been holding back. And now the galaxy was about to learn what happens when you push humanity too far. The humans' madness. The Xar'Thul warship shook violently as its internal alarms blared in panic. Inside, the crew scrambled. their sleek blue armor reflecting the pulsing red emergency lights. Something was on board. Something was moving through the ship like a phantom. But it wasn't something. It was him. Marcus Kane had breached their defenses, and now he was tearing through the ship's corridors like a storm of flesh and steel. Xar'Thul watched the live security feed from his ship above Xar'Thul, his hands clammy against the console. The Xar'Thul were elite soldiers, warriors trained from birth to fight, hunt, and kill. Their armor was resistant to energy blasts, their reflexes twice as fast as most species, and their combat tactics legendary across the galaxy. But against Marcus Kane, they were nothing. The beast inside the human. A group of Xar'Thul troopers gathered in a defensive position at a junction, their plasma rifles aimed forward, their breathing sharp and controlled. They had seen the feed. They had seen what Marcus had done to the Vorgrath. They weren't dealing with a man. They were dealing with a monster. Then the lights flickered. The troopers' grips tightened on their weapons. Their leader, Commander Xar'Thul, bared his fangs and activated his helmet's thermal vision. Nothing. No heat signature. No movement. Then, a shadow dropped from the ceiling. Marcus hit the ground like a thunderclap, moving so fast that the first two troopers didn't even register his presence before their throats were cut. The rest fired instantly, blue plasma bolts turning the corridor into a blinding inferno of energy. Marcus was already gone. He had slipped through the crossfire like smoke, weaving between the blasts as if he had predicted every shot before they were fired. Commander Xar'Thul blinked, and Marcus was in front of him. The human's hand shot forward, grabbing Xar'Thul by the face and slamming him into the wall with bone-crushing force. The last thing Xar'Thul saw before darkness took him was Marcus's cold, predatory grin. The galaxy's worst fear comes true. Xar'Thul's stomach churned. This isn't war. This is a massacre. He could hear the screams over the open comms, Xar'Thul troopers begging for backup, crying out in disbelief. This was supposed to be a simple capture mission. Marcus Kane had turned it into a horror show. Then, the main communicator crackled to life. It was Commander Xar'Thul, still aboard the lead warship. His voice was filled with disbelief. What is this creature? Xar'Thul gulped, forcing himself to respond. A human. Silence. Then, that is not a human. That is a goddamn nightmare. The fall of an empire's pride. The Xar'Thul fleet was in full retreat. The warship Marcus had boarded was abandoning ship, escape pods shooting out like fireflies in the dark. But Marcus, he wasn't done. Xar'Thul's scanners detected something terrifying. Marcus had reached the ship's reactor core. Was he about to blow up an entire warship just to make a point? Then, through the chaos, Xar'Thul saw something on his display that made his lungs freeze. Marcus wasn't planting a bomb. He was rigging the ship's thrusters. He was about to send the entire warship crashing down onto the Xar'Thul capital city. Oh no. Madness or brilliance. Xar'Thul slammed his communicator again. Marcus, stop. This is too far. You're going to start a galactic war. Marcus's voice came through, calm and relaxed. Xar'Thul, buddy. I don't start wars. Xar'Thul's throat went dry. What do you mean? Marcus chuckled. Humans don't start wars. We finish them. Xar'Thul could barely think. But you're going to kill millions. Marcus sighed. Relax. I'm not that cruel. Xar'Thul's scanner beeped again. Something had changed. The warship's trajectory was locked. Not at the Xar'Thul capital. Not at a military base. But at a barren wasteland. Marcus wasn't destroying civilians. He was sending a message. That Xar'Thul needed to understand. If they came after humans again, they wouldn't get another warning. The message is delivered. The Xar'Thul ships desperately tried to stop the falling warship, but it was too late. It plummeted from orbit, turning into a burning meteor, slamming into the Xar'Thul wastelands, with an earth-shattering explosion. The fireball rose miles into the sky. Xar'Thul stared in stunned silence. The Xel'Thul fleet had lost. Not just militarily, but psychologically. They couldn't fight this human. They couldn't control him. They couldn't stop him. And if Marcus Kane was just one man, what would happen if an entire army of humans decided to go to war? The aftermath. Marcus walked away from the wreckage, stretching. He pulled out another piece of Vorgrath meat, took a bite, and smiled. "You know what this needs? Some barbecue sauce." Xar'Thul nearly screamed. The communicator buzzed one last time. It was Commander Xar'Thul. His voice, filled with pure, undeniable fear. "We surrender." And in that moment, Xar'Thul realized the truth. The galaxy hadn't just met its greatest warrior. It had met its apex predator. The galactic panic. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves across the entire Xel'Thul Empire. An entire warship had been hijacked, piloted into the wastelands, and destroyed. Their elite forces had been wiped out by a single human. And worst of all, that human wasn't even trying. Xar'Thul sat in his ship, staring at his console, unable to move. His hands trembled, his mind refusing to process what had just happened. This is wrong. This is all wrong. The Xel'Thul were one of the most feared species in the galaxy. Their warriors were bred for war. Their fleets had crushed entire civilizations. But today, they had been humiliated. By one man. The Council's immediate response. Alarms screamed across the Xel'Thul capital, their towering cities filled with chaos. Civilians fled into bunkers. News networks interrupted all broadcasts with urgent warnings. Within minutes, a high-emergency meeting was called by the Xel'Thul Grand Council. Inside the council chamber, a massive room filled with holographic screens and high-ranking officials, panic and disbelief spread like wildfire. The Supreme Overseer, an aged Xel'Thul with deep crimson scales, slammed his clawed hand against the table. One human. Asterisk, asterisk. His voice was laced with anger and something more terrifying. Fear. Our best forces. Our greatest warships. And this Marcus Kane, annihilated them without breaking the sweat. A military strategist, his eyes filled with dread, spoke carefully. "Supreme Overseer, our forces were completely unprepared. Unprepared. He had a knife. We had a fleet." The room fell silent. Then a transmission interrupted the meeting. A broadcast to the entire galaxy. A single image appeared on every screen in the council chamber. A human face. Marcus Kane. He was grinning. Leaning back against a burning Vorgrath corpse, he casually chewed a piece of meat and waved at the camera. Then he spoke. "Hey folks, I hear some of you are freaking out." He took another bite, swallowed, and smirked. "Relax. I wasn't trying to start a war, just wanted to grab some dinner." The council members were too stunned to speak. Marcus tapped his knife against the Vorgrath's skull, then continued. "Now listen. I get it. You don't like surprises, and seeing a human eat something that's supposed to be impossible probably freaked you out." His smirk widened. "But here's the thing. You guys never asked what humans can do. You just assumed we were weak." A chilling silence filled the chamber. Then Marcus's expression turned serious. "Here's my warning. If you send more fleets after me, if you try to capture me, or if you think humans are just another species you can push around." He leaned in, eyes dark. "I won't be the one coming next time. It'll be the entire Terran fleet." He leaned back again, voice calm. "And trust me, boys, you do not want to see what happens when we get serious." Galactic leaders react. The transmission spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Governments, military factions, and ruling empires froze in disbelief. The Xel'Thul Council immediately classified Marcus Kane as a universal level threat. The Vorten Dominion, an empire of ruthless conquerors, held an emergency war council. Their supreme warlord, after watching the footage, simply muttered, "We do not challenge this one." The Galactic Union, a peaceful alliance of over 60 civilizations, sent a priority message to Earth. "We request diplomatic negotiations immediately. We must discuss." Marcus Kane. But it wasn't just the ruling powers that reacted. The criminal underworld, black market dealers, and bounty hunters all took notice. A human had just made the entire Xar'Thul empire look weak. And that meant one thing. Everyone wanted a piece of Marcus Kane. Earth's response. The Human Council speaks. On Earth, inside the Terran High Command, a meeting was being held. The room was filled with the most powerful human leaders, military generals, intelligence officers, and diplomatic strategists. At the center of it all sat Admiral Rourke, leader of the Terran Defense Fleet. He watched the footage of Marcus Kane's broadcast without expression. When it ended, he sighed, rubbing his temples. "God damn it, Marcus." The room was silent, waiting for his response. Finally, he leaned forward, voice sharp. "Send a message to the Xar'Thul Council." The communication officer nodded. "Message, sir." Rourke exhaled. "Tell them Marcus Kane is acting independently. He does not represent official Terran policy." The officer typed swiftly. "And if they insist on pursuing him?" Admiral Rourke's eyes hardened. "Then tell them this. If they try to kill one of ours, we will burn their worlds to the ground." The room went silent. Then the order was sent. Marcus Kane, now the most wanted man in the universe. As the transmission spread, one thing became clear. Marcus Kane wasn't just a man anymore. He was a legend. Some called him a monster. Some called him a god. Some called him a walking disaster. But one thing was certain. The entire galaxy was now watching him. And Marcus, he simply wiped his knife clean, took another bite of his meal, and muttered to himself, "Man, I could go for some dessert." The galaxy holds its breath. No one knew what Marcus Kane would do next. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was forever changed. And humanity had just announced its place at the top of the food chain. The dawn of a new era. The galaxy had always believed in balance, a silent, unspoken rule that no single species could dominate completely. Power was spread between empires, alliances, and warlords, keeping the universe in a state of uneasy peace. But after Marcus Kane's impossible victory over the Xar'Thul Empire, that illusion of balance shattered. For the first time in recorded history, an entire species, humanity, was being reevaluated. And the galaxy had reached one terrifying conclusion. Humans were not prey. They were the predators. The ripple effect. Fear spreads. Within hours of Marcus Kane's broadcast, intelligence agencies across the galaxy worked tirelessly to assess the situation. The Galactic Union, a federation of over 60 species, panicked. A meeting was called at the Galactic core, where diplomats from every major power gathered. A hologram of Marcus Kane was displayed at the center of the Grand Chamber. The Xar'Thul ambassador, his scales a dull shade of gray, a sign of deep anxiety, stood first. "This creature must be contained." His voice trembled. "You saw what he did. He is not normal. He does not follow our rules. He does not fight the air like the rest of us. If this Marcus Kane is what humans are capable of, we cannot allow them to roam free." A representative from the Xar'Thul Dominion, an empire of technologically advanced insectoid beings, tapped her claws against the table. "Contain. No, this is far worse." Her many black eyes blinked in unison. If one human can do this, what will happen if their entire species decides they are hungry? A hush fell over the room. Then the unthinkable happened. The Vorten Dominion, an empire of warlords known for their brutality, stood down. Their supreme warlord, a towering reptilian beast covered in ceremonial battle scars, crossed his arms, and snarled, "We do not challenge this one. We do not challenge his kind." The other delegates turned to him in shock. The Vorten Dominion never backed down from war. But today, they had no intention of fighting humans. Bounties, assassins, and a new target. While the governments debated, the criminal underworld saw an opportunity. A bounty was placed on Marcus Kane's head. And not just any bounty. A galactic record-breaking 500 million credits. Enough to buy a fleet. Enough to buy a planet. Overnight, assassins, mercenaries, and bounty hunters from every corner of the universe set their sights on him. Marcus Kane wasn't just a problem anymore. He was the most wanted man in the galaxy. And he didn't give a damn. The Terran fleet responds. On Earth, inside Terran High Command, Admiral Rourke sat before a massive holographic display, watching the fallout unfold. The Terran intelligence officer next to him looked up from her tablet, her voice uncertain. "Sir, what do we do?" The galaxy had declared Marcus Kane a threat. But Marcus was still human. Still one of theirs. Admiral Rourke leaned forward, his hands steepled together. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. "We do nothing." Murmurs spread across the war room. The intelligence officer hesitated. "Sir." Rourke's eyes never left the screen. "We don't interfere." He exhaled slowly. "Because right now, the galaxy is terrified of one human." Asterisk, asterisk. He turned to his officers. "Let them be afraid." The silence that followed was heavy. But deep down, everyone in that room knew the truth. If Marcus Kane was left unchecked, the galaxy would soon learn what real human warfare looked like. And that was a lesson no one wanted to learn. Marcus Kane's next move. A predator unleashed. Far from the diplomatic halls and war rooms, on the fringes of the universe, Marcus Kane laughed. He stood in the middle of a lawless space station, surrounded by 100 bounty hunters, all aiming their weapons at him. Plasma rifles, blades, kinetic gauntlets. Didn't matter. They were prey. Marcus cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders, and smirked. "All right, boys." He pulled his knife from his belt, twirling it lazily. "Let's see what you've got." The bounty hunters charged. And in that moment, Marcus Kane did what he did best. He hunted. The beginning of a new galactic order. The galaxy had changed. Empires that once thought themselves invincible now lived in fear of a single man. The greatest warriors of the universe refused to challenge humanity. And somewhere, deep in the cold abyss of space, Marcus Kane kept moving forward. Because he wasn't just a soldier. He wasn't just a threat. He was the first of a new era. An era where humanity didn't just exist in the galaxy. They ruled it. Final words. The legend of Marcus Kane begins. Marcus wiped the blood from his knife, stepping over the bodies of bounty hunters who had dared to challenge him. He pulled out his communicator, casually opening a channel. Corvell's nervous voice crackled through. "Marcus, what have you done now?" Marcus grinned, wiping blood from his knuckles. "Made some new friends." Corvell groaned. "The bounty on you has doubled. You need to lay low." Marcus took a deep breath, looking up at the vastness of space. "Nah." He smirked. "I think I'll go hunting instead." And with that, he walked off into the shadows. A legend in the making.